But speaking of the Clippers, Harden. I think Harden takes a discount to stay with the Clippers against his own will because he doesn't really have any other choices.
Correct.
And the Paul George situation might be a little bit different. Now we have some slop from friend of the podcast, Keith Pompey.
Let's go.
Keith has gotten everything wrong for like 3 years, but every time he reports something, I'm like, maybe this time the agent got it right. Like the last thing he got right was the PJ Tucker thing in 2022. When and they phoned that in, and I don't know who. I looked it up to see if Paul George and PJ Tucker had the same agent. They don't. So it's not like that connection is there. Let's read our friend Keith Pompey.
Okay.
The Sixers are closely monitoring the situation, hoping the Clippers let George slip away. But the Clippers have to know their roster, as currently constructed, is dangerous as long as it remains healthy. George and his representation also realize that. That's why I keep wondering if his perceived interest in the Sixers is all about leverage.
Wow.
You're the one reporting
it. Yeah. Keith is like,
that's not how this works.
He while he was writing the article, he had the like usual suspects realization. Like the coffee cup fell out of his hand. Wait a minute.
Paul George's Kaiser
Sose. Yeah. No.
Yeah, that's So the other quote from here was, the Sixers' desire to sign Paul George next offseason has been described as the league's worst kept secret. There are some who expect both sides to reach an agreement, leading George to join forces with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey next season. So, I've had a few people ask me about this. I had a tweet where I said, I think it would be a mistake to give a max contract to 34-year-old Paul George, who multiple surgeries. His game should age pretty well if he's willing to be a third option like he's been this year with the Clippers, just because he's massive and he can shoot threes. Yeah. And he started at such a high level of athleticism that even when he declines, he'll still be probably athletic enough to play until he's like 37, I would say, if he really wants to. Now, I was concerned about his play this year. I know the analytics still like him. I was a little bit concerned about his play just watching him, because those games where the shot doesn't fall, it can get ugly. The decision-making is really bad. He is not a high feel enough player to kind of make up for some of the faults in his game when the shot isn't falling, just like every kind of aging star is. But then like last night, like when the shot's falling, he looks great. Like he still looks like Paul George, and he is one of the greatest catch and shoot. Like, I don't think people realize this. He's like maybe the best catch and shoot wing of all time, other than like Dirk. Yeah. I think I don't even think Dirk put up the same volume and efficiency, because Dirk didn't shoot many threes. No, I think it's like Clay and then Paul George. Like Paul George has like had multiple seasons where he's shot like 8 threes per game and made like over 40% of them.
Paul George has like 12 straight years of being like in the like top 10 to 15 of NBA players. You know what I'm saying? Like he really is like, people always say, oh, we underappreciate guys. Paul George probably should get like more flowers than he does, like for the career he's had. Like
it's hard to be that steadily good for that long.
He like people forget how fucking young he was on the being the best player on those Pacers teams.
Yeah.
He was always the comp I would use for like Tatum when like Tatum was setting out with like the teams. It was like the only other guy we've seen like be this good this young, like it was Paul George, like going toe to toe with like LeBron and some of that stuff. And my concern is like, I'm worried because of everything we've just talked about. He's had some really horrific injuries, most notably like that one in I think it was the Olympics or national. I can't remember which international.
Yeah, that was a while ago, but
a while ago.
He broke his leg, I think.
He broke his leg, but like, you know, he's not like the healthiest guy in the world. You know what I'm saying? And that's probably not going to get better. And if you're the Sixers, you already have a guy who is not very healthy that often. So I just like, you kind of want You want someone who's a little bit of an Iron Man who doesn't miss a lot of games. And I don't know.
That's not the star to pay. That's not the third star to pair if you're worried about availability.
Yes. You probably want Mikal Bridges or someone like that who always plays 82 games like every year. So
yeah, that would probably be more. I mean, if there were someone available like that this offseason, I'm sure they would be interested. But the difference is they would have to give up nothing to get Paul George. Like,
that's true. Yep.
The cap space, absolutely. Yes, they would have to give up on that.
Yeah.
The thing is that I'm looking at Kawhi Leonard's contract right now. And I'm assuming they went to Paul George and said, we'll offer you something similar to Kawhi Leonard. And he probably said, no, I want as much as I can possibly get. And that, dude, Kawhi's making 49, 50, and 50 the next 3 years on this extension. So he declined his option for next year and then signed off that 49, 50, 50. If Paul George wants more than that, which is his full max is like 50 a year for 4 years, or 50 a year even for 3 years, and or more than 50 a year, I should say. That's where you're like, if you're the Sixers, you're basically doing all the cap space that we've talked about. You're basically going to have Maxey, Paul George, Embiid, maybe one other guy, and then minimums. Because you're clearing a ton of space here, and you're going to have to be super creative with how you build this roster, and you're going to have to nail all the margin moves. And if both of these guys aren't available, I don't love the idea of doing this in 2024. I just think you have to build your team a little bit differently than the past. Like, I think we got obsessed with this idea of having, like, the Celtics are the rare team where they've been able to kind of pull it off, where they have like 3 or maybe even 4 stars. But the majority of those guys were available for very low prices. They signed reasonable contracts. And in addition to that, they also are just kind of like, they're all generally near their prime except for Jrue Holiday. And Jrue was willing to scale down his role in a way that a lot of other stars are not willing to. Now, I don't think you'd have an issue with that with Paul George. I think if anything, Paul George wants to scale down. Like, I don't really think that Paul George, someone said his dream is being tall D'Anthony Melton, which is just perfect. Yeah. But I'd be a little bit weary to give out that big of a bag. And I think that's what it would take to get him away from the Clippers. Cause like, I still think he wants to retire a Clipper. Just back to the Sixers. I've said this on Twitter. I'll say this again. I said it on other podcasts. The only way I'm like on board with the Paul George thing is if they're like, fuck it. Joel Embiid might only have a year or two left. Yeah. And we're going all the way in this next 2 seasons. And then on top of that, we're going to trade for like Lauri Markkanen. We're going to give up 3 first-round picks and get Lauri Markkanen's scam contract at $17 million a year. And then we're going to have Tyrese Maxey shooting, Paul George is shooting, Lauri Markkanen shooting, Embiid. And then it's like, then I'm like, okay, you're young enough with Maxey and Lauri. You're going all in, but you're going all in, but you still have, when you're in the post Embiid years or whatever, you'll still probably be somewhat competitive. And like, you have like a vision for, or even if you want to rebuild in a few years or whatever, but you're making the move now to try to help Joel win a championship while he's still healthy enough. And you're putting yourself on the same level of talent as the Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks and the teams that you're going to have to beat in the East to get through the East. So that's the scenario where I'm fine with it. That's the scenario where I'm like, you make your all-in move. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I'm scared to death of it becoming another Tobias Harris contract. And that's the real fear for me. But like I said, if they think Embiid only has 2 years left, 3 years left, it might be a worthy risk. Like, if you're getting him, like I said, if you're signing him in free agency, the risk downside of not giving up a ton of picks and getting a star and then potentially getting a fourth guy like Lauri Markkanen, or a lower usage fourth guy like Lauri Markkanen, I would be fine with just being like, let's be the massively skilled team that has a lot of two-way guys and can kind of figure out how to compete with the best teams in the league. So that's the scenario where I think I'd be fine with it. But in general, I would prefer can you just build a normal team? Can you just find like scam like trades like the Celtics did, or like teams that are just like, hey, let's make one smart move after one smart move. Like, we didn't give up a lot to get Buddy Hield. If it doesn't work out, we can let him walk. If he gets overpaid, we got Kelly Oubre on a great veterans minimum deal this year. Lowry and Batum, if they want to not retire after this year, they seem like they could be good fits on cheap contracts. Like, let's just keep the good moves rolling and don't overreact and overpay for a guy if you're worried, if you think that he could age poorly or if his availability is just going to be shot after this year.